Good afternoon and welcome to today's media teleconference on NASA's Fiscal Year 2025 budget proposal. My name is Abby Donaldson from NASA's Office of Communications. Today we'll hear from NASA Administrator Bill Nelson as well as Chief Financial Officer Margaret Vogt-Strauss. Margaret will walk us through some of the details of the President's budget proposal for NASA. She will refer to a Fiscal Year 2025 budget briefing through this teleconference. As this is an audio-only teleconference, the fact sheet will be available online at nasa.gov/budget if you would like to follow along. In addition to the Chief Financial Officer, we will have several members of NASA's leadership team with us on the call today for answers and questions. They are Ken Bowersox, Associate Administrator for Space Operations Mission Directorate, Nikki Fox, Associate Administrator for Science, Bob Gibbs, Associate Administrator for Mission Support, Mike Kincaid, Associate Administrator for the Office of STEM Engagement, Catherine Kerner, Associate Administrator for Exploration Systems Development, Bob Pierce, Associate Administrator for Aeronautics, and Kurt Vogel, Associate Administrator for Space Technology. Now, I'll turn it over to NASA Administrator Bill Nelson for opening remarks.
Hey guys, let me set the table for you. Thank you for joining us, and I'm going to make an assumption that most of you listened to the presentations that all of us just did starting at 1 o'clock on nasa.gov. And so I'm not going to repeat a lot of the things that I said, but let me set the table for you. All of this 25 budget has to be entertained along with the 24 budget, both of which, those two fiscal years, were constrained in spending because of the act that occurred in Congress in order to save the U.S. government from going into default on paying its debt. In other words, what happened in Congress was that a small handful of people in the House of Representatives held up their votes in order to advance legislation to proceed with the appropriations. And in exchange for their votes, they required that there be reduced spending in fiscal year 24 and fiscal year 25. So much so that the very best was going to be fiscal 24 was going to be, at best, the 23 approach, and fiscal 25 was going to be the fiscal year 23 approach plus 1%. But when it all got allocated out, without Congress being able to enact an appropriations bill until last Friday, which we are now in the 6th month of the fiscal year 24 having started October the 1st, 2023. And the way it got allocated is when you remove all the non-discretionary spending in the federal budget, namely Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, a bunch of other programs in the Agriculture Department that are entitlements. In other words, they're entitled to spending by law, so they don't go through the appropriations process. And the appropriations process then affects the rest of it, called discretionary spending. And in discretionary spending, the largest part is defense. And defense usually is going to be held harmless, if not increased, by each of the Congresses. And so the slice of the pie that is left over non-defense discretionary spending keeps getting smaller and smaller. So when you allocate that out to the rest of the agencies, you have a smaller slice of the pie for 24 and 25 as a result of the law whose basic purpose was to avoid the default of the United States government paying its treasury bonds and its treasury bills when they became due. So then when you allocate out the rest of that non-defense discretionary among the various subcommittees of the appropriations committees in both the House and the Senate, then you even have additional cuts. The long and short of it is on the CJS, Commerce, Justice, and Science Subcommittee of the Appropriations Committee, for 24, what they ended up with was about a 2% cut for NASA from the 23 approach. NASA fared better than most, well, as a matter of fact, all of the other agencies in the subcommittee, which was close to a 3% cut. But nevertheless, in a little agency that is doing an awful lot in so much, and so many of our programs are very expensive programs, it makes a big difference. So when you compare what they passed last Friday night with, and that was $24.9 billion, with compared to what the president, read NASA, had requested in 24, that was a $2.3 billion cut from what we had requested. So naturally, we have to make hard choices. The budget that's being announced today is the 25 budget, and we've got all our experts here to tell you about it. It actually is, compared to when President Biden took over, and therefore since Pam and I have been here at this agency, it's a 9% increase. And so, thank goodness, we at least moving in that direction. But we're not going to get out of this hole until you finish both fiscal years, 24 and 25. And it's already law. The 25 budget will start in October the 1st. That'll have to go through the appropriations process, but they will be constrained according to what I've just said. So the thing is that NASA makes do with whatever we're given, and this is an agency where the impossible becomes possible. And so the NASA family is ready to go. We know that there's always a tremendous return on NASA investment. And we've seen that ripple throughout not only the American economy, but also for the betterment of people around the world. And it's in almost every discipline: science, technology, aeronautics, medicine, the whole bit. Bottom line, the American economy is boosted. So I'm going to turn it over to our Chief Financial Officer, Margaret Vo-Shoss, and we'll start taking you through the specifics, and then we'll entertain your questions.
All right, thank you, Administrator Nelson, and good afternoon to everybody. I'm Margaret Beauchos, the CFO for NASA, and I'm delighted to offer this overview of the President's FY 2025 budget request for NASA. This request represents, as the Administrator noted, a 9.1% increase since the start of the administration and a 2% increase over our FY 24 appropriations. This request represents a realistic budget request that advances U.S. leadership in space, improves our understanding of Earth and the universe, and invests in new aviation and space technologies for the benefit of humanity. As noted at the beginning, I'll be referring to some of the slides in the budget request summary, and I'll try to note those slides to make sure that you're tracking along. And so I'm now tracking to slide 2 in that presentation, where this budget request includes a $7.8 billion investment in Artemis that is shaping the future of human exploration, as well as engaging the broadest space exploration coalition in history. This request provides $4.4 billion for space operations to advance groundbreaking technology demonstrations and scientific investigations aboard the International Space Station, all while developing commercial destinations to continue U.S. presence in low Earth orbit. It also invests $1.2 billion in space technology to develop, demonstrate, and transfer revolutionary technologies that grow the space economy and transform NASA's mission. Moving on now to slide 3, the budget requests $7.6 billion for science to make progress across a broad and balanced portfolio of missions that will further the frontiers of space science discovery. Within that science request, we include $2.4 billion for Earth science to enhance our understanding of Earth systems, improve our response to natural hazards and climate change, and strengthen our management of our natural resources. This request provides $966 million for aeronautics to reduce the cost and emissions of commercial airliners and foster the competitiveness of U.S. aviation. This provides $144 million to engage students and educators from diverse communities as we grow the STEM pipeline and the Artemis generation. And finally, this budget requests $3.4 billion to fund NASA's workforce, information technology, and the infrastructure necessary for mission delivery, as well as a commitment to promoting diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility for our workforce and our partners. So within NASA's budget request are 4 key priorities that I'd like to highlight, and those start with slide 5. And that first priority is establishing a sustainable lunar presence through our Artemis program. In 2022, NASA first released our Moon to Mars objectives and strategy that were developed with feedback from U.S. industry, government, our international and academic stakeholders, and the public. And in doing so, NASA's charted a shared roadmap and resilient blueprint for long-term exploration of the Moon and Mars. And in this budget request across the 5-year budget horizon, NASA makes significant investments to advance these objectives, furthering efforts in science, infrastructure, transportation and habitation, and operations. And those representative investments are made across NASA's mission directorates. So moving on now to slide 6, in this request, we also update the schedule of major mission activities in our Moon to Mars manifest, with milestones based on the 5-year budget horizon of NASA's FY 2025 request. So in this, you'll see the 5-year window of the budget denoted in the blue column headers across the top of the slide, as well as with milestones that go beyond the budget horizon through 2032. And this graphic brings together the Artemis contributions by mission directorate that you can see noted in the first column, and where you can see each of their contributions spanning their own row across the table, many of which were highlighted in the previous slide. So moving across the timeline, I'd like to note key milestones starting with fiscal year 2024. So in that third row showing science, we began our steady cadence of commercially provided landings to the lunar surface, our CLPS missions that are outlined in little dash boxes, in preparation for our crewed missions to the Moon. NASA has had 2 CLPS launches this year, and on February 22nd, Intuitive Machines made history as the first company to land on the Moon. In 2025, the Artemis II flight test will launch, sending our astronauts on the first crewed mission around the Moon in more than 50 years. Also in 2025, under the Science and Space Technology rows, You'll see that CLIPS launches will transport 2 robotic scouts, Viper and Cadre, to explore the moon and demonstrate these new technologies. In addition, 2 of our partners will demonstrate cryofluid management, and our science instrument Hermes will be ready for installation on Gateway. In 2026, SpaceX will conduct an uncrewed lunar demonstration of its human landing system, and later that year, Artemis 3 will launch, returning Americans to the surface of the moon. NASA that year will also begin building Gateway in lunar orbit. Starting in 2027, you'll see the second purple colored row where Space Operations Lunar Communications Network will be upgraded to support lunar exploration. And noted in the Space Technology row, we will demonstrate nuclear thermal propulsion in space through a collaboration with DARPA. In 2028, Artemis 4 will launch with the enhanced upper stage that will enable co-manifesting of large payloads for building out capabilities at Gateway. And in the Space Technology row, across the time horizon, NASA will conduct technology demonstrations both in space and on the lunar surface to mature those capabilities needed for transportation and operations on the moon and Mars, including a demonstration of fission surface power and a pilot plan for in-situ resource utilization. In 2030, you'll note Artemis 5 will launch, and thereafter NASA will begin an annual cadence of Artemis missions to the moon. Moving on now to slide 7 of this deck, you will see key elements brought together here as part of NASA's Moon to Mars architecture, and how those elements will enable us to learn, live, and stay on the moon, and ultimately prepare us to do the same on Mars. You'll see segments shown from left to right at the top of the graphic, depicting how NASA is taking what we learn from our operations in LEO and Earth analogs to inform how we will explore and sustain our presence on the lunar surface, and ultimately extend those capabilities to Mars. And you'll see a gold box drawn around each of the elements that are funded in this FY25 budget request, which largely fall under the human lunar return and foundational exploration segments of our Moon to Mars architecture. So moving on now to slide 8, I want to highlight our second priority, which is maintaining U.S. human presence in low Earth orbit. Within the $4.4 billion request for space operations, NASA will invest $1.3 billion to focus on 3 strategic efforts that support U.S. presence in low Earth orbit. First, investing in technology demonstrations and scientific investigations on the ISS that will pave the way for human exploration, benefit life on Earth, and facilitate our development of commercial space stations. Second is developing a U.S. deorbit vehicle that will safely deorbit the ISS once it retires at the end of the decade. And third, partnering with U.S. commercial space industry to develop and deploy commercial destinations in LEO that will enable continued American presence for scientific exploration and commercial activities. Specifically, this request includes $170 million for 3 commercial LEO partnerships in Phase 1 that are all working through early design maturation. And next in Phase 2, NASA will fund a competition for CLD services, which includes certification. And it's through these balanced efforts that NASA will support the scientific, technological, and economic opportunities enabled by the ISS while laying the groundwork for commercial innovation and the next phase of human presence in LEO. Moving on now to slide 9, our third priority is protecting and understanding our home planet. This budget request includes $3.2 billion to observe, understand, and safeguard the Earth. Of this amount, $2.4 billion is for Earth science, and this funding will deepen our understanding of the Earth systems and make data readily accessible for analysis and decision-making. Additionally, $32 million will fund advanced capabilities for emergency response operations that help first responders address challenges such as wildland fires. $522 million is for green aviation, with a focus on establishing a sustainable flight national partnership that's projected to decrease fuel consumption by up to 30%. Furthermore, NASA will invest $236 million to continue the development of the Near-Earth Object Surveyor mission, or NEO Surveyor, which is scheduled for launch in 2028. This planetary defense initiative aims to detect, track, and characterize potential impact hazards posed by asteroids and comets. Additionally, $16 million will support a project called OSIRIS-APEX, which is studying physical changes to the asteroid Apophis during its close encounter with Earth in 2029. Finally, we will invest $41 million to actively monitor and mitigate orbital debris and ensure the long-term viability of our space activities. Through these investments, NASA is committed to advancing scientific knowledge, responding to climate change, enhancing emergency response capabilities, and protecting both Earth and space environments. Moving on now to slide 10, our fourth priority in this budget is enabling discovery through a balanced space science portfolio. Through NASA's investments in science, we continue to inspire the world and benefit humanity, whether by unlocking the secrets of the universe with the James Webb Space Telescope, conducting cancer research on the ISS, putting free and open data about our changing environment in the hands of scientists, farmers, and emergency responders, or by enabling the first ever commercial moon landing just a few weeks ago through the innovative CLIPS program. The $7.6 billion request for science invests in over 125 missions, including 54 that are operating for launch and more than 70 in operation. Through over 4,000 openly competed research awards, NASA funds U.S. scientists from all 50 states, the District of Columbia, and Puerto Rico, from almost 300 universities, as well as industry and government laboratories. This funding enables progress on exciting science while carefully balancing within and across our programs in planetary and earth science, astrophysics and heliophysics, and biological and physical science. I'm now going to refer back to slide 4, where you'll see a budget table of NASA's FY 2025 budget request for $25.4 billion, highlighted in the vertical blue box in the middle. Also of note, this budget includes a 2% pay raise for NASA's civil servant workforce. And this will be my last slide, as I'll spend some time delving into the request for each of NASA's accounts and unpacking some of the details of what is being funded within the themes under each of these accounts. Starting with Deep Space Exploration Systems, the request is $7.62 billion, and this includes $4.21 billion for the Moon to Mars Transportation System theme, which encompasses the programs that together create our space transportation system, namely SLS, Orion, and our Exploration Ground System. It also includes $3.29 billion for the Moon to Mars Lunar Systems Development theme, to develop the systems that will be used to land humans on the Moon and to explore and work on the lunar surface, all of which will prepare us for Mars exploration. This includes funding for the Human Landing System Program, Gateway, the Exploration Extravehicular Activity and Human Surface Mobility Program, as well as Advanced Exploration Systems. And the last theme in this account provides $117.1 million for human exploration requirements and architecture. This theme includes the Moon to Mars Architecture Development Office that supports planning, configuration management, and integration with international partners, all driven by NASA's Moon to Mars objectives. For space operations, the request is $4.39 billion, and this includes $1.27 billion to operate and conduct research on the International Space Station. It provides $1.86 billion for space transportation to fund the crew and cargo program that provides a regular cadence of crew rotations and cargo resupply missions to the ISS. It also funds development of the U.S. deorbit vehicle capability and funding for the Commercial Crew Program to certify and maintain technical insight into the vehicles that transport our astronauts into space. It includes $1.09 billion for space and flight support to provide mission-critical space communications, launch and test services, and astronaut training to support its customer missions. And finally, it includes $169.6 million for the development of commercial LEO destinations. For space technology, the request is $1.18 billion to invest in the civil space technology base. And this includes $459 million for technology demonstrations to conduct ground-based testing and space flight technology demonstration in areas including solar electric propulsion, cryogenic fluid management, fission surface power, and space nuclear propulsion. This request includes $341 million for technology maturation to advance revolutionary exploration technologies from proof of concept to demonstration, such as in situ resource utilization, autonomous operations, space transportation, and entry, descent, and landing technologies. It includes $140 million for early-stage innovation and partnerships to fund a broad, diverse base of innovators. And it includes $242 million for small business innovation research and small business technology transfer. For science, the request is $7.57 billion to make progress across a broad and balanced portfolio of missions that will explore the solar system and the universe. And this request funds the following 5 themes. Within Earth science, the $2.38 billion request includes $854 million for Earth systematic missions, including funding for the Earth System Observatory missions, PACE, and NISAR. These missions are aimed at comprehensively studying Earth systems and climate change. It includes $606 million for Earth science research programs that will address complex interdisciplinary Earth science questions, $220 million for competitive missions within the Explorer and Venture class programs, $168 million for a new Responsive Science Initiatives program that consolidates and better aligns, scales, and connects NASA's observations and applied science with user needs. And it includes $150 million for the Landsat Next mission. Within planetary science, the $2.73 billion request includes $612 million for innovative missions, including Dragonfly, the Venus missions Da Vinci and Veritas, and Europa Clipper. The funding request for the Mars Sample Return mission is to be finalized, pending the completion of NASA's ongoing internal assessment of the MSR architecture. It includes $458 million for lunar discovery and exploration, which includes funding for CLIPS and science instrument suites for innovative lunar exploration and science. It includes $390 million for planetary science research to provide grants to support scientists who use NASA mission data to make discoveries about our solar system. It includes $236 million for the planetary defense mission, NEO-Surveyor, scheduled for launch in 2028, and $112 million to support key international collaborations with ESA and JAXA. Within astrophysics, the $1.58 billion request includes $384 million for the ongoing development of the Nancy Grace Roman Space Telescope, scheduled for launch in 2027, $317 million for operations of the great observatories, including the James Webb Space Telescope, Hubble, and Chandra, $269 million for the Competed Explorer program, and $50 million for precursor science and technology maturation related to the Habitable World Observatory. Within heliophysics, the $786.7 million request includes $237 million for the Competitive Explorer program, including the MUSE and Helioswarm missions that will expand our knowledge of the sun and its effects on space weather. It includes $252 million for the Heliophysics Research Program, including support for the Heliophysics Drive Science Centers. It includes $64 million for continued development of the Interstellar Mapping and Acceleration Probe, slated for launch in 2025. And it includes $48 million for space weather investigations and research aimed at enhancing the protection of technology, national infrastructure, and astronauts from space weather events. And finally, within biological and physical sciences, the $90.8 million request will fund space biology investigations that seek to understand how living organisms respond to and evolve in the spaceflight environment, and to conduct physical science investigations from the unique vantage point of space. For aeronautics, the request is $965.8 million to lead the transformation of aviation in 4 key research areas: ultra-efficient airliners, high-speed commercial flights, future airspace and safety, and advanced air mobility. Within this request, we include $269 million for advanced air vehicles to conduct research for more efficient aircraft and propulsion technologies that improve efficiency and reduce emissions. It includes $264 million for integrated aviation systems to demonstrate transformational in-flight technologies for improved efficiency and reduced noise and emissions. It includes $155 million for transformative aeronautics concepts to fund revolutionary aviation concepts and university research. It includes $151 million for airspace operations and safety to work with the FAA to modernize the National Air Traffic Management System and enable the advanced air mobility market. And it includes $116 million for aerosciences evaluation and test capabilities that support national ground test infrastructure of 12 large wind tunnels. For STEM engagement, the request is $143.5 million, and this includes $57 million for space grants that support students across all 50 states, the District of Columbia, and Puerto Rico. It includes $46.3 million for the Minority University Research and Education Program, $24.8 million for EPSCoR, and $15.4 million for Next Gen STEM. For safety, security, and mission services, the request is $3.04 billion, and this includes $806 million for NASA's Centers, Engineering, Safety, and Operations to ensure NASA's center-level institutional and technical capabilities are mission-ready. It includes $733 million for our mission-enabling services, which funds 11 mission support enterprise organizations that provide business operations and mission support to the agency. It includes $180 million for our agency technical authorities to provide independent technical oversight for our safety, health, quality, and engineering expertise required to maintain mission success, as well as $629 million for information technology investments and $697 million for infrastructure and technical capabilities across all NASA centers. For construction and environmental compliance and restoration, the request is $424.1 million to construct, repair, and revitalize institutional infrastructure that support capabilities across all centers and to carry out NASA's environmental stewardship responsibilities. And lastly, for the Office of the Inspector General, the request is $50.5 million for their programs, personnel, and contracts to conduct independent oversight of the agency. In closing, the FY 2025 President's Budget Request for NASA contributes to the global leadership of the United States. This budget is an investment in the future, in U.S. innovation and competitiveness, and in our next generation workforce. And that concludes my overview of NASA's FY 2025 request. Thank you.
Thank you, Margaret. We'll now take questions from reporters on the line. Those on the phone can press star 1 to be entered into the queue at any time, and press star 2 if you would like to be removed from the queue. Your lines are on mute now, and the operator will open and close your mic when we come to your question. Operator will have the first question. We will hear from Jeff Faust at Space News.
Hi, good afternoon. Going back to the planetary science budget and MSR, since MSR is still TBD, when do you expect to finalize what you will seek to spend on MSR in 2025? And will that represent an increase in the overall planetary budget, or will you have to take money from other planetary programs to cover that cost for MSR within that $2.7 billion envelope? Thanks.
Okay, I was having a side conversation, but in essence, your question, I think, Jeff, is you want to know about MSR, right?
Right, and how its funding will affect other planetary or other science programs.
Okay. Well, there are several things going on. First of all, there's the direction by Congress in the report language in the bill that they just passed last Friday. And they basically said, and I'll just read it to you, the agreement provides no less than $300 million. Now, this is the 24 budget. No less than $300 million, and up to the President's budget request to support MSR pursuant to the directives. So, in other words, in them passing the 24 appropriations, they left it up to NASA of what to insert for MSR, and that's the 24 budget. And we are deferring to the interim committee that is going to report at the end of March. So in April sometime, the actual report, I think, gave us 60 days, but we're not going to take that. We will report in April what then would be the spending in 24 and 25. And so that's why there is not a figure there in 25. Does that answer your question?
Sure, and just to briefly follow up, when you figure out in particular what you will request in 2025, will that be in addition to the $2.7 billion overall for planetary, or will you have to reallocate money from other planetary programs to stay within that $2.7 billion envelope?
Hey, Jeff, this is Nikki. So we'll be, obviously we're looking forward to getting the results from the independent review team, and then we'll have to make some pretty tough choices. Obviously, we have to maintain a balanced portfolio overall, and so that's going to be a tough choice for us, but stay tuned and we'll get you that answer in April.
Thank you. Operator will have the next question. We will hear from Eric Berger.
Hi, thanks very much for doing this. Two questions. First of all, I'd like to follow up on Jeff's question just to explicitly ask and try to get an answer. Will the planetary budget being requested, is that going to remain the request, or is that subject to change if you do decide you want to spend more money on MSR and FY 2025? And secondly, looking at the commercial LEO destinations budget, that number goes down and then goes significantly up in out years. And I'm just wondering why the money is not needed now and why you think it will be there in future years for commercial space stations. Thank you.
All right, Eric, I'll take the MSR. We don't expect that the planetary top line will go up.
And for the commercial LEO destinations, I'd say the way that the funding goes down and then back up, it's an artifact of the way the contracts are phased. You know, the first part we're doing under reimbursable Space Act agreements where we are partnering with multiple companies for development contracts. The second phase is intended to be a services procurement where we will invest along with other folks who will be interested in those platforms. And the funding that we have here, I think, is very generous, and it's about the limit of what we can afford while we're trying to work under these budget levels.
Thank you, Ken and Nikki. Operator will have the next question. Will we hear from Marcia Smith at Marcia Smith.
Hi, thanks so much for taking my question. I wanted to ask about the deorbit tug for the space stations, and could we get an update on the request that you put into the domestic supplemental? I haven't heard much about any progress on that, but are you still hoping to get some money for that in 24? And if not, what are you looking at in terms of schedule for when you might have a deorbit tug, and which companies are you working with on that?
Yes, Marcia, we are still anticipating that the domestic emergency supplemental appropriations bill will be taken up by the Congress. The administration has split one supplemental into two. The first one is addressing Ukraine, Israel, and Taiwan. That's the issue that you've heard a lot about recently. The second includes not only the deorbit vehicle, but also all of the destruction for both NASA and the Department of Defense in the communications dishes in Guam, which was totaled by the typhoon out there. So we are hoping, even though there's only 6 months remaining in the fiscal year, that the Congress will take up both of those emergency supplemental bills. You had another part to your question.
Yes, I was wondering when you're anticipating having it available and which companies you're working with.
Well, I don't want to disclose any companies yet. We're still, looking at proposals. But we've got multiple providers interested, and we would be looking to have it up there around the end of the decade, 28, 29, depending on how fast we can get it together. We're on the fast side. We'd like to see it ready in 3 or 4 years, but typically with space projects, 6 years is more realistic. However, we expect that there's going to be a lot of benefit from the technology that's been developed for our other transportation vehicles, so we may be able to do it a little faster than the standard 6 years.
Thank you, Administrator Nelson and Ken. Operator will have the next question. We'll hear from Micah Maidenberg at Wall Street Journal.
Hi. I think this might be for the administrator. The 24 request had a more aggressive forecast, going out a few years compared to this year's request. For example, the new expectation for fiscal year 28 is $2.5 billion less than what you saw a year ago. I mean, I realize these are just forecasts, but it seems like the expectation is that funding is going to be a bit less robust than you thought. Why is that, and why did things look better a year ago?
Hey, Micah, you got to talk louder.
All right, I'm gonna try that again. I apologize. The last year's request had a more aggressive forecast going out a few years compared with this year's request. The out year numbers are less than what you thought just a year ago. Why is that? Why did things better a year ago? And then finally, I just wanted to see if somebody can confirm that placing Artemis 5 in 2030 is the first time that has been discussed by the agency. I think it is. Thanks.
So the out years are starting with a smaller base, which has already been cut 2% from the 23 approach, and of which the fiscal year 25 only gets you back to the level of the 23 approach. And so as you go forward on the future out years, I'm going to ask Margaret to talk about the percent growth there.
Sure. Just to reiterate what the administrator said, in FY24, the president's budget request was higher, $27.2 billion. And that out-year growth did reflect 2% annual growth starting from that large number. So that would be the delta that you see. We use the same out-year growth assumptions, just on a different starting point, going from 24 president's budget request to our budget request this year. Thanks.
And then with regards to the Artemis 5 question, this budget request does support Artemis 5 in March of 2030. This reflects a 6-month adjustment driven by budget levels anticipated over the next 5 fiscal years.
I might say, if you want some intrigue, last week ago on 60 Minutes, Blue Origin said they're ready for their landing on Artemis 5 in 2029.
Thank you, Administrator Nelson, Margaret, and Catherine. Operator will have the next question. We will hear from Irene Klotz at Aviation Week.
Thank you. My question is for Administrator Nelson. You've been through this budget process for decades and decades in various roles. How tough is the budget environment today compared to what you've experienced historically for NASA?
Ms. Klotz, remember back about 10, 15 years ago, there were budget caps for something like 10 years running. in that era called sequestration. And there were all kind of funny games with funny money, trying to get around them, appropriations tricks. But nevertheless, things were constrained considerably. So I'd say this is mild by comparison to back then.
Thank you.
Operator will have the next question. We will hear from Aiden Quigley at CQ Roll Call.
Hi, yeah, my question was already answered. Thank you.
Aiden, I believe you dropped, so we'll circle back to you. Operator will have the next question. Operator will have the next question. We will hear from Leonard David at Scientific America magazine.
Yeah, hi. Maybe for Administrator Nelson and perhaps Nikki Fox, can you give me an idea of how CLIPS, robotic landing on the moon, how that program is going? I mean, as far as you can tell now, with we have the Astrobotic failure, we have the IM-1 missions this year. Are they on track, or will they move into next year? Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks for the question. We're really proud of our CLIPS program. We already have many successes. Just having new companies come into the space business, come into the NASA family, having them building landers for us. We know it's a very high risk endeavor, but it's extremely high reward for us. And so, with the Astrobotic Peregrine, yes, unfortunately, they had an anomaly shortly after launch, but we learned an awful lot from that anomaly. We also got great science, I will add, while Peregrine was out there. And then, of course, Intuitive Machines with their soft landing and great science coming from that lander. So we look forward to the upcoming missions. We have another Intuitive Machines and a Firefly, and then Astrobotic later in the year. So really looking forward to that program, but we're really proud of it. It's great to see all these new companies coming in and building landers for us in support of Artemis.
That's all the questions we have in the queue. I'll pause to see if we have any more. Members of the media with additional questions can reach out to me at abby.a.donaldson@nasa.gov after this call. A replay of this call is available on NASA's website. A replay of this call will also be available for 30 days 1 hour after this call is completed by dialing 800-945-4244 with passcode 41124. All our budget documents are available online at nasa.gov/budget. I will now pass this back to Administrator Nelson for closing remarks.
Well, thanks. Stay tuned. A lot of activity coming up. Get ready. We've got Sierra Space coming. We've got Boeing Starliner coming. Other launches with Crew Dragon. I just saw Nancy Grace Roman being processed at Goddard. Just one thing after another is happening, so it's going to be an exciting year. See you guys.